Tech rehearsals is where everyone on a show is combining their art and craft into a single cohesive unit, and the stage managers are at the center of all of it. If you do it well, you'll get to say,
"Oh yeah, it's all coming together."
My name is Kent, and this is your half-hour call.
Attention cast and crew, this is your half-hour call. Half hour to the top of the show. Half hour.
Alrighty friends, we are back with yet another episode of the Almost Complete Guide to Stage Management. Today we are talking all about technical rehearsals. Specifically, we're talking about my top 5 tech tips to help you survive your first tech. But if this is your first time here, welcome. My name is Kent, and you are watching Half Hour Call, where we're dedicated to shining the spotlight on technical theater. So if you want how-to videos, interviews with industry leaders, or general theater updates, make sure you hit that subscribe button and notification bell so you never miss another video. But first things first, what even is a tech rehearsal? Technical rehearsals are where all the elements of a show are finally put together into a cohesive unit that can be safely repeated 8 times a week, week after week, for however long your run is. This process often has the longest hours of the entire production process, and can be quite stressful and really puts the communication skills of your team to the test. But this is the time where you're finally seeing all of the elements come together, and for that reason, it's a lot of stage managers' favorite part of the process. Everything that you can do up until this point to learn the show and hit the ground running is going to make this process more successful. And while of course the director is still in charge of the product or the show that you're working on, this is where the stage manager starts to take charge of the process and really makes sure everything is streamlined and working smoothly. There are several different types of technical rehearsals, and depending on the needs of your show, you might not experience all of them. The first kind of technical rehearsal is called a paper tech. This is a lot closer to a production meeting than it is to an actual rehearsal, but regardless, it's still considered a technical rehearsal. A paper tech is where the directors, designers, and stage managers all come together and talk through on paper the technical needs and elements of a show. Ideally, this is where you're getting preliminary cues into your calling script and really understanding the director's vision and the scenic designer's vision and the lighting designer's vision for how complex scene changes are going to take place. Sometimes producers don't want to bother with or pay for the extra hours for a paper tech, but if you can convince them that it's worth it, it'll often pay dividends in reduced frustrations later on in the process. The next kind of technical rehearsal is called a dry tech. This is where you're working on the technical elements of the show without the cast present. So it is just the crew members, stage managers, directors, and designers. If there's any automation, complex special effects, or fly rail cues, you should probably do a dry tech. This is everyone's chance to work out problems with scene changes or complex technical elements before adding the element of actors. For shows that have complex technical elements, this dry tech process often happens whether or not you have a formal dry tech day or not. If you don't have a formal dry tech day, it'll just usually happen right before you run the scene with actors. So the actors will step away, you'll run the scene change, you'll reset, and then you'll say, okay, now we're gonna do it with actors. So really, you're still doing it, you're just chopping it up and putting it in your regular tech rehearsals. For shows that are like straight plays with a unit set, you probably don't need this, but if there's any element that could impact someone's safety, it is a good idea to have a dry tech process. And this brings us to the actual tech rehearsals with the actors. This process could range from, say, 2 days to anywhere up to 2 weeks, depending on the complexity of the show and the contract that you happen to be on. The goal of technical rehearsals is to start at the beginning of the show and work your way to the end of the show, starting and stopping, going back and redoing sections as needed, but putting together all of the elements. And the stage manager has a pretty heavy hand in making sure things stay on track, knowing when to go back and redo something versus when you can go ahead and keep going is an art in and of itself. Now you might be wondering, Kent, you said a tech rehearsal without actors is called a dry tech. Does that mean a tech rehearsal with actors is called a wet tech? No, wet tech isn't actually a real thing. I take that back. It is a real thing if you're doing a technical rehearsal for an outdoor show during rainy season. Then it's absolutely a thing, but it doesn't mean the thing you would think that it means. Most of the time, actors will not be in full costume for these tech rehearsals. They'll be asked to wear colors that are similar to that of their costume, and they'll probably wear a piece or two that might impact their acting. For example, I'm sure that Elsa wore her dress with the quick change when they were doing the Frozen tech process. There's another type of tech rehearsal that some stage managers like to incorporate called cue to cues, which is where you go from cue to cue in the show. So you skip chunks that are just dialogue or just songs or what have you, and you go from, say, scene change to complex technical element to scene change. I would strongly advise against skipping chunks of the show in your first pass through, because otherwise you are inevitably going to miss a small light change, some tiny issue with a prop, something else that could get resolved during this tech rehearsal. If you're falling behind and running short on time, instead of having the actors skip chunks of text, have them speed through things that you don't anticipate having any cues. That way you'll still find out if you missed something, and you'll save a little bit of time. Pro tip, because of all the stopping and starting throughout this tech process, actors are probably going to forget their lines left and right. That's totally normal and okay. If you have an extra PA or someone else on hand, it can be really helpful and save a lot of time to have someone in the front few rows of the audience on book to help the actors through these scenes. If there are quick changes in the show, there will probably be a quick change rehearsal scheduled, and usually this is just the actor, the wardrobe department, and stage managers with a stopwatch. And then you move on to dress rehearsals, which is usually the last step before previews. This is where the actors are in costume and you're running the whole show as if there's an audience. There's just no audience. And while the goal is to run dress rehearsals straight through, there are inevitably going to be show stops, especially if it's a more complicated show. And now it is time for me to share my top 5 tips for getting through your first tech process. Now, this is assuming that you're starting as an assistant stage manager or a PA or an intern, but honestly, it can apply to anybody. Number 1 is to breathe. Tech can be a stressful process, and if the stage managers are stressed, the entire company and crew is going to be stressed. If you're calling a new section for the first time, taking a breath and centering yourself can be one of the biggest factors in whether or not you successfully call the section. And if you're working backstage, taking a moment to breathe before responding to problems can be super helpful as well. Number 2 is to be present. Tech has really long hours, and especially in a technically simple show, it can be really easy to start checking out or looking at your phone or doing a crossword puzzle. Resist that temptation. This is your chance to learn how the show functions and operates, so being present is super helpful. One way I stay present backstage as an ASM is that whenever the stage manager calls hold, which is putting the pause on the tech rehearsal to address an issue, go back and rerun something, or fix a problem, I'll pop my head out and walk out on stage if it's safe to do so, and check on the actors and make sure that the stage manager can see me and knows that I'm present and paying attention to what's going on. This is a really wonderful opportunity for actors to bring problems to you that are basically too minor to stop the entire process about, but still need to be addressed. Like they might ask for glow tape on something, or a spike mark, or for a prop to be adjusted in a certain way. This is really valuable information when you're running the deck, and things that you can communicate during that hold to other crew members. But it can be really difficult and draining to stay on and present during the entire tech process, especially when it demands such long hours, which is why number 3 is to take your breaks. Whether we end up abolishing 10 out of 12s or not, tech is still a very draining and long process. So you need to take your 5s, take your 10s, take your full dinner break in order to recharge, refresh, and come back with a fresh set of eyes. If you're an ASM, you are the eyes of the production stage manager backstage. You need to be doing your best work in order to catch things that the stage manager doesn't have the ability to catch because of their calling location. And you can't pour from an empty cup. So taking your breaks will make you more productive during the time that you're working. Tip number 4 is to always ask for what you need. Sometimes this can be as simple as information, realizing that it's actually quite helpful for you to ask the stage manager, hey, do you think we're gonna go back and do this again? Or do you think we're gonna keep moving forward? So that way you know whether to reset something or not. Or if a scene keeps stopping and starting while you're watching a complex scene change backstage, don't be afraid to ask for them to run that entire section completely so that you can see if the scene change has enough time to happen. There can be a lot of pressure from producers and directors during the tech process to keep things moving and stay on track so that they can get through it and run the whole show. But ultimately, the goal of tech is to create something that is safe and repeatable. So if you don't know for sure that you're going to be able to repeat it, ask for the chance to try again. And tip number 5 is to trust your company. Trust the actors, trust the technicians, trust your team, and most importantly, trust yourself. Sometimes when you feel like you're being pulled in opposite directions by people who want different things during tech, taking a step back and realizing that everyone is working towards the same goal can really instill your trust in the entire process and your team. What was your biggest takeaway from your first tech process? Let me know down in the comments below. And if you liked this video, give me a big thumbs up so that I know I did a good job and YouTube knows that I did a good job. As always, thank you so much for watching, liking, commenting, and subscribing. My name is Kent, and this has been your half-hour call.
This snazzy feathered production assistant, as well as other cool stage management merchandise, is now available at kentjamescollins.com/store. Link in the description below.